pleasure for me to be here. As you said, we met earlier, and then you told me you've running an Angular Kenya meetup, and I was like, okay, I really like to speak there. So I also I'm based in Germany, so it's almost the same time zone. And that's why it's really exciting to be here. And I'm going to talk about SEO and Angular, search engine optimization, because of course, like single page applications together with SEO is always really complex and complicated. Why I will of course elaborate that too. And I definitely want to dig deeper and explain how to make that more easier with server-side rendering, especially of course with Angular Universal. But first of all, maybe when SEO is so complex with single page applications like Angular, why should we use Angular then in the first place? I mean, everyone knows we get a lot of benefits using Angular. I mean, Angular is our most favorite framework out there, of course, and we have better caching possibilities. Everything is rendered client-side. That means that we don't transfer big, huge HTML files to the client. So whenever the user is loading the data or is clicking on a button, the whole page will not be refreshed, but just the part that actually needs to be new rendered. Like maybe there are coming new data we fetch from a service, and this part of the website will be now re-rendered. Hence, we have a new way of user experience, since it more feels like a desktop application and not like a browser-based application. And of course, for that, we also get a lot of performance benefits because we don't have to fetch the whole HTML files from the server, but can just fetch the data and everything, because that's why it's called client-side rendering. Everything is rendered on the client. Okay, we want to use Angular, but what actually is search engine optimization, and why do we want that in our website, in our web application? Why do we need search engine and optimization, and what is it in the first place? Basically, it improves your promoting for your website to be discoverable on some kind of search engine bot, like we have in Googlebot, like we have in DuckDuckGo, or Bing or Yahoo. Lycos was also back then a big search engine. We want that if users typing a category we providing a website for, like for example, we sell consulting, Angular consulting, and anyone who's entering in Google Angular consulting, we want to be the first hit, like the first ranked top website. And that's called search engine optimization. And for that, we will now learn different kind of ways how we can actually optimize our website in Angular to be more findable and discoverable, and how to do that in the first place, because as I said, search engine optimization in Angular might be a little bit tricky. And of course, it doesn't only target one single marketing funnel, it's called. It targets a lot of people. Maybe anyone who, maybe not if a person types specifically your category inside Google, not only Angular consulting, but maybe the person just types consulting and is maybe searching for something completely different, but they will find you as well. And maybe they're thinking, maybe I should think about the Angular consulting as well. So the reachability is way higher. And of course, everyone tends to think Google is ranking your website on the first place. Oh, this website must be really trustable. So of course it improves your credibility and trust. And we will learn actually that it isn't that much of an effort actually to bring search engine optimization into your Angular application. So the return of investment, as we will see, is really high. So basically, in the end, we want to be our website should be on the first place. So if we develop, and we will, a small Pokemon website, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Pokemon, but Pokemon was back then, like in my young age, it was like and cartoon, like a TV series with small animal-like creatures, and it was really, really hyped and had a lot of games out there. So if we create this kind of site, as we will, we want to have our Pokemon website at the first ranked place when someone is typing Pokemon inside Google. So basically, how does this ranking comes and how does maybe a search engine bot actually tries to find your websites to rank it, and how does it work? Basically, all the search engine in the World Wide Web is trying to find new websites or older website, any kind of website. And how can they do that? Of course, new domains that will be registered, they get that, of course. I mean, Google is really good in data crawling, right? So Google knows, and all the other search engine bots knows that immediately about new websites. So they will crawl the website in a term of that they will crawl for your index HTML. So in a small headless Chrome mode, it crawls the index.html site and tries to find some keywords that is helping this specific kind of search engine bot to rank your website. Like in the sense of you have a lot of keywords like Pokemon, or more specific kind of keywords like which kind of Pokemon, a water or a plant or fire Pokemon, whatever, then of course it will get more and more detailed information about your website. Okay, but when we think about how a single page application works, we know that anyone, like a search engine, trying to crawl for our index.html, all what the search engine bot is getting is an empty index.html page, because this is the whole part of having a single page application, right? We have one single HTML file and everything will be rendered inside this body. We have our common well-known app root tag, which is then later one will be with the help of JavaScript, the whole app root component will be rendered here inside. But the search engine doesn't execute JavaScript or rendering something. They just want to crawl the index HTML file and try to find something. So this is basically the issue about all frameworks that implementing single page applications, that there isn't anyone findable here right now on this website for the search engine bots. So they just ignore it and they don't rank it specifically. And this is the main issue what Angular ships when it comes to search engine optimization. And this is the main challenge I want to face during my talk. But before that, let me introduce myself from my side as well. As already mentioned, I'm Martina. Hello. I'm based in Germany, as I said, in the south of Germany. I'm a Google Developer Expert in Angular. Also, a Women Tech Makers Ambassador, also a specific kind of program from Google to get support to bring more women into tech. Like I organize a lot of workshops, free workshops. Mostly I teach Angular, but any kind of programming language that brings women into tech and empowering them. And of course, this is more or less all about my free time. I'm working as a trainer and consultant, also as a coach, as I specialize myself in SEO, in RxJS and state management. RxJS is this observable library, this reactive programming library in Angular. And these are my main topics. I consult companies in all over around the world. If you have any kind of questions, you can always send me a DM or going to my GitHub account. There's my email address putting down, but I also have in my summary page later my email address. Just ping me anytime. If you have questions right now, please wait at the end of the talk. We will have 10 minutes to talk about your questions. And so I can just get into the flow of presentation. As well, if you not have heard of it yet, I'm a co-organizer of NG Girls, we actually doing with Angular like free open workshop for any kind of woman all over the world, some workshops, a full day, and with some mentors together, and we teach them Angular basically. We make a cute little application that can be developed in one day. And basically we're doing this right now remotely all over the world. Actually today was one workshop. It was in Rome, in Italy, because the NG Rome conference is happening tomorrow. And usually we have an NG Girls workshop before each and every conference. But enough from this. Let's get back about search engines. So how do they work exactly? You always must know the technology you want to face or you want to integrate to actually improve, of course, your application. So how exactly does search engine doing the trick? As I already mentioned, the crawling part, they do crawl your website, your index HTML. And as you maybe know, in your head area on the top of the page, we have a lot of script tags or a lot of URLs that also links or have some references to other pages, maybe to sub-pages of your application or whatever. And it tries to find all these kind of URLs and crawl them too, to just be sure that every single URL that is inside your web app is discovered. So it's like iterating through all the URLs. And it crawls them, and after it crawled all, it goes to an indexing phase. The indexing phase more or less just means to try to find some keywords to actually register them. So if you have like Pokemon all over your website as a keyword, it definitely will index this website really, really high when it comes to someone searching for Pokemon. Of course, it's really simplified. There are some other factors that taking care of this. It tries also to find some links, like how many other websites all around the world are having a link to your page. This also counts when it comes to the ranking, but for simple reason, we leave it like it crawls and index, and that counts basically. Okay, so what is about these keywords I'm mentioning over and over again? Basically, these keywords are called meta tags. These keywords or these meta tags are taking place inside the head tag of your HTML page. As you know, we have a body tag and a head tag, and this head tag we have script tags, style tags, but also meta tags. These are for sure not displayed on the page, but here you definitely can define all kind of keywords, like a description, the title of your page, which is basically the title that is written down in the tab of your of your Chrome tab or the window tab, the title over there, or some keywords like comma separated keywords you can put there with a lot of information. You can put there a long list to make sure that your website is described as much as possible in details. So, but if this is not rendered yet, and how do you actually get the information? In Angular, everything is so general, and we try to write components as general as possible and just put those keywords or put those information inside a component as soon as it gets rendered. Like we have a basic list component, right? And in this list, at one part, we're using this list component maybe for displaying a list of users. On another side, we're displaying a list component for a list of animals, whatever. And so we don't know really what information, we don't know during compile time or something like that, or in a static way, which information should now go inside these keywords. So this has to be the keyword, we need to find a way to change these keywords dynamically. But for sure, Angular has already a solution for that. We have two kinds of services. We have the meta service and the title service. Basically, the title service does not do that much. It's just for like setting the title for having a nice title displayed in our tab or inside our window. But the more important part is, of course, the meta service. Here we give just an array of objects. For example, okay, we have here the meta tag. I just see there's a typo. It's for sure, of course, called description, not description. For the description, for example, we want to insert this kind of content. We have an author meta tag, we have a keywords meta tag, and we want to set them dynamically. Here we have two ways. We can add tags if they are not existing yet, or we can update the tags. And I think we should just see that in a small live demo. So I prepared a small application. So I just have a small Pokemon website. It's basically just like a list, like a master detail view of all these creatures, Pokemon they're called. And I have a list overview, and when I click on the list, I get a detail view. So nothing special, just to showcase some challenges of search engine optimization. So it's an Angular 12, version 12 application for sure. And basically, in the first place, when my app component is loaded, I want to initialize my application with some default information, some default meta tags. And for that, I created a SEO service and using here dependency injection to actually use it. And inside the SEO service, inside this function over here, I just set my title and I created some meta tags to my website. For example, the author of the website. Okay, this is not that important, to be honest, for a search engine bot, but just so we can for sure set here some keywords, a description, and so on and so forth. We also actually can insert some instructions for the search engine bots. For example, I tell here, yes, do please index my website and do follow all the URLs you find when you crawl my indexed HTML site. So basically, this is a default behavior of all search engine bots. But I can also say, no, I don't want to have my website to be indexed. It's a private one, so please go away, a small robot, leave me alone. I do just some instructions for the search engine bots. So, and if we see that, for that I have it already up and running with ngserve. And if we see that in our head, we have my title over here. It's also, as you can see, displayed here. It's Martina's Pokédex. And we have a lot of meta tags. The ones I initialized and the other ones were added later. Like, okay, we have here this index follow the author and a lot of meta tags. And we do see already here something for Twitter. So that means maybe that we can even have some meta tags for social media. Yes, we do. I will come to that later. Because search engine optimization and being discoverable is not only important for search engine bots, but also for social media bots. But as I mentioned, I will come to that later. So, okay, that's great. So this is really a general description, right? And if I click on this Pokemon over here and I want to get some details, basically this web page /Pokemon/1 that leads to this Pokemon, nothing gets updated here, but more information for the search engine bot means being more discoverable. So also my child pages will be discoverable. And that's actually what I want, what I'm aiming for. So what we might need to do is to update all these meta tags as soon as I click and go to a detail view. So let's do that. I have the app component, and when I'm clicking on a detail view, of course, the detail component will be actually displayed. Here we have the Pokemon weight and the Pokemon height and things like that, and the image URL. And all I want is, as soon as this component is entered, I need to fetch the Pokemon for sure to calling my REST API. But then I want to use this information as well to update the tags. And for that, I just simply put a small tag operator in my general REST call. Like here I have this book API service, Pocket API service, and I'm trying to get a Pokemon by a specific kind of ID. I'm getting this ID out of the route params. So I get the number 1 here, so that the ID 1, and then I want to call my REST API for getting the more detailed information about the Pokemon. And then I'm just using inside this whole observable pipe a tab operator. And with that, I can just call the SEO service again and setting the metadata as well again, like more updating the metadata. The tab operator basically does nothing more than just running the code inside with the item that is coming, but not asking you to manipulate or filter or whatever, or return an observable. It just is more like a peek inside and you can run an action. You can do something. And I'm using this operator here to do nothing more than calling my SEO service. And here then I overgive the Pokemon I got from my REST service. And then the whole tags basically in the end will be updated. Like the description tag, the keywords, and what we might not know yet that much, the social media tags as well. And then for each entry, of course, over here, I want to update my meta tag. So let's see how does this look like. So if we just running the page first again, and we go to this general meta tags, just the basic information about my whole website. And as soon as I click on the specific kind of Pokemon, we see all the meta tags are immediately updated. And now I have really specific kind of information for this specific Pokemon. For example, okay, his name, the ID, and the category of creature, like it's a grass and potion Pokemon. If you don't know Pokemon, this sounds a little bit weird, but it's of a type grass and poison. So the first lesson learned is try to create your meta tag as specific as possible. Okay, so far so good, I think. But as I said, we will talk about this social media box a little bit more later. We do have specific kind of keywords that social media bots who are trying to crawl your website as well immediately recognize these kinds of keywords. And for example, for the Twitter social media bot, this keyword must have a prefix like Twitter. And for what is that? For what makes that sense? For example, if you tweet something, maybe you ever have wondered why some URLs you put inside your tweet, for some there will be a preview image and for some not. And this preview image is rendered just based on these tags. We have a Twitter image that defines, we will see that actually later in action, defines the exactly image that should be displayed in the preview card. It's called Twitter preview card. And of course, a small summary that is displayed beneath the image, the title, and a small description as well. And this information shows already a small preview, and of course, hence, users know already what this URL, what this website might be about, And it's more likely than that they click on it actually, right? If you know what maybe this URL is about and you have already a small description and an image and a title, you definitely think, yes, it's something about Angular change detection optimization. Yes, I click on it, other than having just a cryptical URL, right? Okay, so far so good, but I mean, I talked about the meta tags and how beautiful they are, but the index HTML is empty, right? It's so beautiful to talk about the meta tags and how you can, with the help of JavaScript, update them and do some more crazy cool stuff with JavaScript, but the social media bots can't read JavaScript. They can't render JavaScript, the social media bot and the search engine bot. So there's no point of talking about dynamically rendering the meta tags, because, of course, for sure, if we just try to discover the page source, what we see is just the app root. There's nothing more, nothing more. And no meta tag is there inside, nothing at all. I mean, there is a meta tag, but it's more like about the viewport. Like, it has nothing to do with search engines. So what is the point after all? And then I can tell you something that just counts for the Google bot. Yeah, the Google bot loves JavaScript. I mean, I said, no, the search engine bot doesn't render JavaScript, but to be fair, for the Google bot, that isn't true. Just the Google search engine bot has an extra step for rendering the JavaScript before indexing. So the Google bot does the same. It crawls your website, your index HTML, and then it indexes it. It tries to index it first, but in parallel, it executes JavaScript. So it does render all your meta tags. It does try to crawl the follow-up URLs, like all the child pages, all of our detailed views of the Pokemon, and re-renders these meta tags as well. So we do have a complete re-rendering of the Angular application, and we are discoverable. Really, really great, isn't it? I mean, so everything is fine. I mean, we have the Google bot. Google loves everything. Yeah, but the thing is, no one else loves JavaScript than Googlebot. I mean, in some countries, Google is even restricted and banned even. So we can't just trust on the Googlebot. We can't just say, okay, we just care about users that are actually using Google to find something. We have a lot of other search engines like Bing, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo. These are like the other three most, at least here in Europe. In Europe, I can tell Bing, Yahoo, and DuckDuckGo are the most, after Google, apparently, the top most likely search engines that will be used here, that is used here. And even if you say, I don't care about other search engines than Google, but being findable for social media bots, and especially for Twitter, should be a goal for everyone who wants to be really discoverable. The Twitter algorithms, for example, I know it. I'm just to be fair when it comes to social media, I'm just using Twitter. So for me, I'm not on Facebook and not on Instagram and things like that. So for me, I'm really, really deep into the social media Twitter bot, not so much into the other ones, but they're all working the same. But what I actually wanted to say, so that's why I know the Twitter algorithm a lot. So the Twitter algorithm is more likely to retweet or show your followers and other persons who maybe even doesn't follow you a card with a URL that has a card preview. And for that, just to see how this actually is rendered and how it's previewed, Twitter offers a card validator. Like, you can put here some kind of URL, maybe our Pokédex URL, you will see that actually later. And for that, we can try to preview card. And then without anything, it will say, okay, we can't render the card preview because no meta tags are found. So even at least for the sake of the social media bots, we need to take care about pre-rendering or rendering without actually using JavaScript. And here exactly, tada, leads me to the point how to use Angular Universal, because here Angular Universal jumps to the rescue, especially what it implements server-side rendering. So in a nutshell, basically Angular Universal is a solution for pre-rendering your Angular code on server side. You can render this JavaScript code either on the fly, like a user is requesting now your Pokemon page, and then the HTML will be rendered on server, and then the HTML will be delivered to the front end, to the web browser, or ahead of time. So you will have maybe a lot of HTML pages that you render ahead of time. It's called pre-rendering actually. And then you have a lot of HTML files already lying on your server. And as soon as the user requests it, this HTML will be delivered. But maybe you think now, but wait for it. That was the reason in the first place why we moved from server-side rendering to client-side rendering, because we do not want to have this loading time of a user clicks on a button and the whole page will be refreshed, or the user has to wait like seconds for the HTML to be transferred over to the browser. That's true, but Angular Universal does way more than just concatenating HTML strings on the backend, what was back then in the PHP days. It does a lot more and it offers a lot more. And the main solution I would suggest to actually use Angular Universal is to say, okay, I want to deliver first the server-side rendered HTML that is rendered ahead of time, and to have the social media bots and the search engine bots gotten already something that is pre-rendered, so they find the meta tags and everything. And the user sees of course already something as well, because JavaScript rendering time also needs a lot of time. So even the performance for the users itself might increase if they just see first an HTML page, like just the HTML page, and then as soon as the JavaScript is rendered behind in the background, Angular Universal takes care to exchange that during runtime. Like in the sense of first you will see something, and then if the HTML is rendered, finished inside the web browser, it will be exchanged. And then you have again the full user experience of your website we are aiming for by using Angular for sure. But of course, yes, even I have to admit, this is already a really advanced scenario. And what you also even can do is to say, okay, we have instructions for the bots, and we can even tell Angular Universal if this user agent and all user agents, search engine bots, have a keyword bot inside. So what we actually can say as well is for all user agents that have the keyword bot inside, we give them the pre-rendered version. And all other user agents, we give just the normal, usual web application out. So we can even like differentiate between the user agents trying to crawling our website, if this is a real person or a search engine or social media bot. And depending on what kind of user agent, we give them maybe the Angular Universal pre-rendered version or the just usual web application. So, okay, I'm pretty sure you're really eager to get into it and how to use Angular Universal. And I really want to not hold you back that from you any longer. So basically, you just use an Angular schematic, ng-add, ng-universal. And for here, for example, we are using Express as a server. So taking one step back, of course, for server-side rendering and delivering this HTML out to the user, we need a server. Of course, it's the HTML files must be fetched from somewhere. So yes, we need a server, and we install immediately an Express server. Express is a framework, a backend framework. With it, you can implement REST APIs, or basically REST services and REST APIs, backend services with Node.js. So it's like a JavaScript framework. You can write JavaScript with JavaScript. You can write your backend server basically. And we will using this framework. It's just already built in. It's battle proven and really good. So we're just using this framework as a default. But you also can use, for example, the Internet Information Service. It's called IIS. So you would install then ng-universal with the IIS in the background. So we have different kind of schematics. Of course, having JavaScript just overall is the most simplest one and easiest one. That's why we installed the Express engine. And basically, how does it work? We do know that we have something inside our app module. It's called a browser module, right? So if we go back to the code and we go here to the app module, we see something, here we see something like a browser module, right? So this browser module takes care that everything will be rendered inside the browser. I mean, that's what it's called. So it just gives us all the functionality of being Angular rendered inside a browser. So what we need is just maybe something's called server module or server rendering module, just like a module that swaps out all the services that are inside the browser module and taking care about the browser rendering. We need to swap them out to creating the same stuff like rendering, but in a server field, like in a server environment. And this is basically what the schematic is already doing for you. It installs everything. It creates different kind of entry points, like, okay, please Angular, if I want to have you rendered server side, use this module. But if you are rendered just normally, use the browser module. And we will see in our Angular JSON, this is really well defined. But we don't have to write it on our own. It's just configuration things inside the Angular JSON we don't need to take care of. The schematic does that already all for us. So we also have different kind of tsconfig JSONs, like type configurations, because we might want to compile our TypeScript a little bit differently when we render the JavaScript and TypeScript on server side. We don't have to, but it's just an option, of course. So we just using basically a different rendering layer. We don't use the browser, but using the server side, a server for rendering. So as I already mentioned, it swaps out a different implementation of specific kind of service that's taking care about just the rendering part. And basically, it also creates us, the schematic also creates us already some specific kind of NPM scripts. And I would say time for another demo. I mean, of course, because it takes time, I did already installed everything. So when we look inside our pages JSON, it's already there. So what does this whole schematic does already for us? So I mentioned the Angular JSON. So maybe we can just already jump in there. And if we have, yes, exactly. For example, here we have for our server target that will be run when we call npm run serve SSR, like server-side rendering, we're using different kind of builder. Okay, we can set different kinds of options. We don't need to use exactly this kind of options. Like we might not want to have source map on server-side rendering as well. We don't have to. We can define the tsconfig JSON, and the server implementation, like the Express implementation, we can find over there. There are other stuff like when it comes to production, that the environments will be replaced and things like that. We know that already. We have that in the other target points, entry points as well. So let's take a look at the tsconfig server JSON, because this is really an interesting one as well. Because here we define next to our maybe server rendering side compiler options also the entry module. Which module should be used instead of the app module? So we defining here that, okay, usually we have in our main TS, we define our entry point as the app module, right? So the schematic creates us this tsconfig server JSON and defining a whole another entry module. And if we take a look now in this app server module, we find that next to the app module that will be imported here, but the browser module that is also imported in the app module will be overwritten with the server module. Because this server module now takes care for the server-side rendering. But of course, just if we're telling our Angular CLI, please render yourself now for the server-side rendering. Last but not least, we also could shortly take a look at the server TS. If you don't know how to write a backend with JavaScript with the help of Express now, don't worry. Basically, it's not important actually that much. Just to take a look that we know how this would look like. We have basically where our static files, we define here where our static files are. We have something like running, like registering the engine, like the entry point, more or less. Like this is the entry point of the application that will be server-side rendered. So it's the app server module for sure. And that we define the view engines like HTML and where you find these kind of views, to this folder where every single HTML files will be rendered inside. And in the end, we're basically just running the Express web server on default on port 4000. And then by calling a function that's called .listen, we actually open our web server and running it and delivering it, delivering the server-side rendered version of our web application under localhost port 4000. So I would see, I didn't do anything more than just writing ng-add inside. So all I want to do now is to build this application for server-side rendering, to creating this dist folder, and to starting this web server. And as well, building always takes a lot of time, so I was so free to build already the dist folder, but you actually run build SSR, but of course npm run build SSR, and then the whole application. We will actually do this later live because I need to build it for a pre-rendered version as well. So we will see this once, but for this example, I already built it. So because it takes a little bit of time, so I run this command build SSR, and this created me basically this dist folder with the server and the browser resources. Okay, so that means in the end, I just need to run and start my web service. And this I have also a script for. It's called npm run serve SSR. So this now will start my web server and shipping out the dist folder. Now we can see this Node Express server is listening on this port. Okay, so let's go. Let's take a look here. If we now go on this website, we have our server-side version, server-side rendered version. Okay, but I mean, to be honest, it looks exactly like the other one. So how can we know that this is now server-side rendered and the HTML we are getting is actually rendered? We can now see the page source. And here we see the whole app root, which was empty with the client-side version, is now filled completely with HTML. So everything here is already there. This is pretty amazing, right? And also, let's try to put it in a Twitter card validator and see how this looks like. So basically, for here, we can have the card validator and putting inside an URL. I mean, I can't put here localhost 4000 now inside, right? So I'm using actually another tunnel proxy. It's called ngrok. It's if you haven't used it yet, it's a great tool. Basically, for this kind of purposes, you're running a specific kind of localhost, small web service on your page, and some validator, or maybe if you ever maybe thought of implementing a Slack bot and you want to test it locally, if the Slack bot is working together, but the Slack bot is, I mean, on the Slack website, and you can't connect the Slack website to your localhost, you need something like a tunnel. And this is basically ngrok about. ngrok creates a public, visible internet URL. So if you would be fast enough for copying the URL that is the scripted URL that is created now, you could actually visit my Pokédex as well. So what it does, okay, I'm creating a tunnel to my localhost 4000. So it's online. The session would be immediately expire in 2 hours. But here we have now this URL that will be forwarded, as we see here, to localhost 4000. So just first to see it works, it's, I didn't copy it. I should just copy it, otherwise it's not working. Now it's, so here we have now the same website, but now it's publicly visible through anyone in the world, basically. And now we can use this kind of card validator as well. So let's click preview card. And here we have 10 meta tags were found, the Twitter card and the summary tag is found, and the card loaded successfully. I didn't put an image at my general page here though. So let's maybe go to maybe 6. I'm pretty sure there I put an image. Yes, beautiful. So there I have this image for this small detailed Pokemon. And even on my detail page and detail view, I have this beautiful preview card because I just updated with the SEO service, as I shown before, the Twitter tag as well with a small image and the preview and so on and so forth. I mean, this looks really beautiful. You just want to click on it and visit it, right? And knowing more about Charizard, for sure. So this would not work for sure if this is just client-side rendered. Amazing. And we all just did that just with ng-add, ng-universal, right? Because if you would actually just to delivering this HTML server-side rendering version just for some specific kind of user agents, we Of course, might you need configure some things, but basically using a universal is really easy. So here we have this card validator, if you're now having Angular universal added and building it actually, and building it for server-side rendering. So if you still think, okay, but this was so complex, should I really care about that? I will bring you another argument for integrating server-side rendering to your web application. It's about performance. As I already mentioned, JavaScript rendering does take a lot of time. And not just that, we know the most bad reputation, one of the most bad reputations about Angular is the initial bundle size. And as we know that Ivy, the new compiler that came with Angular 9, does already a lot to decrease the bundle size. Still, we have so many applications who are so slow to actually being displayed and rendered in the first place. And we do have some tools inside our browsers. For example, we do have something that is called, something that's called Lighthouse. With Lighthouse, we can, for example, create some reports for performance. If you want to deliver our page as a PWA, if the requirements to be a PWA are fulfilled, you can measure here. General best practices, accessibility, and not a really great big topic. And of course, it also creates a measurement about search engine optimization. If you never have heard of Lighthouse, immediately install it after this talk. It's really great. So basically, we would generate a report to measure our website of this kind of measurements and facts over here. But we can actually just measure a specific kind of performance entry. Like we have the initial loading time, the first rendered pixel, the first time to interact. And these kind of measurement facts, we can actually also not only measure with Lighthouse, but also our website, our web API delivers us a specific kind of an observable. It's called performance observable, which when we subscribe to it, we can actually measure specific kind of entries. For example, the first contentful pane. Of course, this string I put over here is not just a random string. It follows a specific kind of keyword, but you find these kind of keywords. It could also be at the first time to interact, like this kind of measurement. And you find all these here on this documentation about all the web APIs. So basically what I do here is just to measure when is the first contentful pane actually rendered. So when is the website loaded to me, and when is the first, when it's able to actually display something to the user. This is this measurement about, and I just put it already inside the web application so we can see the difference. And just a small heads up, it can differ from time to time. It's a little bit depending on, of course, how much HTML needs to be rendered. So it might not have this kind of a difference, but for example, yeah, right now it was 1000 because I had it the first time. But here, for example, we have the server-side rendering version, and this takes usually when you, of course, you would run it more and more times and then creating the average. Usually the server-side rendering version takes about 400 milliseconds, and the the client-side, the bad version, the client-side rendering version takes an average around 600 to 700 milliseconds to have this first contentful pane. So yes, you might think, okay, 200 milliseconds, maybe it's not that big of a deal. That's true, but we have 3 components inside this web application. And basically we have 2 components just displayed here, which is the card and the main area, like the app component, but still it's already 200 milliseconds. So just think about if we have a lot of components immediately displayed inside our app component, and just like thinking about the whole root of components, not root, the tree of components that we usually have in our Angular application. But this is just like what I wanted to show you, a good trick to actually measure it. And it's just a specific kind of entry. Another cool thing to actually measure the performance of your website and to show that server-side rendering also brings a lot of benefit is this performance tab over here and create the profiling. What does the profile? It actually creates, like, re-renders your website and tries to figure out how long does it take for the rendering, for painting, for loading the initial bundle size, and the most important thing, for scripting. Of course, the client-side version needs a lot of time to actually the JavaScript to be executed. And here it's like around 740 milliseconds. So let's go to the server-side version and create the same profile over here. And that's also a reason why I did run everything on an incognito mode, because if you try to render these things in real, like with your normal web browser, all your cookies, all your extensions and everything that you have installed, plugins, whatever installed in your web browser might interfere with this kind of performance measurement. So always make sure you're using the Chrome where you want to measure it in the incognito mode. But we already see that basically the scripting is half as much as it is at the client-side version. And half of it is already a word, right? So basically, if you're now adding it, it's half a second. Like, it's 200 seconds faster when it comes to the first content pane, and it's already like half than faster, do you say that? I'm not sure right now, but I'm pretty sure it just needs half of the time than the client-side version. I'm pretty sure you understood me already. And this is really amazing. I mean, of course, that's not completely true, because the scripting time is, of course, part of the measurement for the contentful pane. So it's just not really completely true, but it's definitely already a lot faster than the client-side version. So hence, you definitely should also think about maybe delivering to your user first the server-side rendering version that the user has already something displayed pretty fast, and afterwards exchanging this with the client-side version. Okay, last but not least, I really want to show now the last point I mentioned, the pre-rendering. Pre-rendering ahead of time. Because Angular Universal offers pre-rendering that renders the whole HTML, as I already mentioned, ahead of time. You can even define which kind of routes will be pre-rendered. So it's not like the whole application will be pre-rendered. You could define that, definitely, but you can also define per route, per child route, which kind of HTML will be pre-rendered. For example, if you say, yes, the user tend to click a lot on Charmander and on Charizard. And on these 2 Pokemons, they click all the time. So these are really 2 sub-routes, 2 child routes that need to be pre-rendered to have the content fast. So all you need to do is to get inside your Angular JSON. And here we have the pre-rendered build property. And here we have something like a routes property. And here we can say, okay, I want to have the Pokemon with the route Pokemon /6 and the Pokemon with the ID 4, I guess it was. Of course, you can. It's an array. You can sum that up to a lot of IDs and subroutes, and you also can actually extract that to a file, like a TXT file or a JSON file, basically, and just add them, not having your Angular JSON overblown, and just putting here the path to this file where all routes are defined. So, of course, what we then need to do is building it again. Like we need to run npm run pre-render, just to make sure it didn't make a typo. It's pre-render, because it always fails when I make a typo. So basically, yes, this now takes a while, because it first renders this TypeScript to JavaScript, and then it basically will execute the JavaScript. So first it will all create JavaScript bundles that we are really familiar with, because these bundles will be definitely also rendered and created when we have our client-side version, just typing ngserve into it or npm run build. And then after that, it actually renders the JavaScript to create the HTML. And if everything is working fine, of course, we will see then 3 different kind of HTML files. The first one for sure is the usual index HTML file with the app root inside and so on and so forth. And then 2 HTML files for each pre-rendered route we defined over here. So yes, one pain point or one critical point everyone is telling regarding Angular Universal, that the building time takes a lot of time. And this is kind of true. I mean, right now we just rendered the JavaScript files, and now now the main.js file is rendered, and now the routes, as we see, pre-rendering routes to the rendering of the HTML routes will now be take place, and it did already. So basically, it's true that it takes time, but with Bazel, if you're not familiar with Bazel, it's like a build tool that supports the Angular CLI and the Angular building time with a lot more optimizations and especially automatizations. And with this kind, just to simplify it, and with Bazel, it's actually way, very faster. So just to a little bit tell that you don't have to wait always that long. Maybe it's worth to take a look into Bazel, basically. And now, if we take a look inside this folder, we have, when I previously opened the browser directory, we just had the JavaScript and the index.html file. But now, if I open the Pokemon directory, we do have an index.html for the route 4 and the index.html for the route 6. So every time now someone is actually routing to this route, it's already pre-rendered ahead of time. So let's see. First of all, I need to serve it again, apparently, otherwise we won't see anything. So what we see is, if we now, for example, go to Pokemon 6, I guess it was. Yes, let's go to Pokemon 6. What we could see is that at the bottom of the page, there's also even like a specific kind of comment, like, okay, this specific kind of page was now pre-rendered. If you go to another Pokemon, let's say the number 1, we don't have that at the bottom, because this route is now pre-rendered on the fly. Like, I request it, then the server renders it and ships it. But the other route, like 4 and 6, is pre-rendered with Angular Universal. So, of course, I used around an hour now. Why you should use Angular Universal and what it brings to you and how awesome it is. And definitely you should now go tomorrow at work and just say, we need Angular Universal. But I also at least want to be fair and mention why maybe it doesn't make sense to use it. For sure, it increases complexity. And it's true, also true that especially when we have this kind of, it's called dynamic rendering scenarios, where we say, okay, in the first place, we want to ship the pre-rendered version to the users and maybe to the bots, that they see already something really fast, and then exchange it in the background with the JavaScript rendered version. This is a really, it sounds simple, but actually this is kind of a complex scenario and not that easy to configure, and especially not that easy to find documentation about it. So it's kind of tricky. Of course, as well, it creates a lot more code. We do know that sometimes if we have really huge Angular applications, we have to deal already with so many files. Maybe if you use inline template and inline styles, you at least don't have a separated style and HTML file, but we have a lot of files. And now we're adding another layer of files, like we have the server TypeScript file and then the app server module, and we do have the possibility to implement the server as well for our purposes for more complex scenarios. Like if it's delivered with the server, we can even call another service and put some data inside doing the on-the-fly HTML rendering server side. So we can do that, but of course now we need to implement the whole server as well a bit. So it's already rendered, it's already created for us, bootstrapped for us, but of course we might need to configure it and adjust it. It's also had a mental model. I mean, after I did this presentation, actually last week, I got a question, and how do you access the DOM from server side then? And I was like, how does this question come up? I mean, you don't access the DOM, the HTML DOM in the browser from server side. The server is just there to render it and delivering your HTML, but accessing the DOM still happens inside your component with a view child or content child. So it seems like also this is like a harder mental model to think about, to think in a little bit different way now, having a server-side version. And yes, as I already mentioned, the build times, but also as I mentioned, it's way better with Bazel, of course. So that more or less what Angular Universal ships to increase the search engine optimization in the Angular website from the Angular side. But maybe the question, okay, do you have any general best practices? So do you have any kind of, oh, you should avoid this and maybe do this, regarding which framework we are using? I mean, yes, of course, there are some basic tricks and tips, but all of them are about just try to leverage a progressive parsing of your HTML, especially like the rendering, of course. Don't do too much tricky tricks with ng content and injections and replacing the HTML inside your component and doing too much in after view in it and after content in it, and that the whole JavaScript must be re-rendered based on conditions again and again, the HTML, because this takes time, right? There's nothing bad about having ng-ifs and ng-fors, but what I actually wanted to point out is like having this content projection. Content projection is something that is everywhere in each kind of framework, and try to leave it simple. Not really keep it small and simple, not trying to use some too many fancy Angular or framework logic to actually render your HTML. Keep it small and simple, and try to focus on getting your content indexed quickly. Like, try to focus on that the HTML the user wants to see, or the search engine bot wants to see, that this user agent can get it fast. Another two really great big advices I would give you is to use measurement tools. I mean, I'm a huge fangirl of Lighthouse, but you don't necessarily need to use Lighthouse. There are other great web page, for example. Web page is another great measurement tool when it comes to performance. But I love Lighthouse because it's a lot of possibilities and different kind of measurements you can actually use. So measure your website first. There's also, at least from the Googlebot, I do know there's a Google Search Console. And inside this Google Search Console, you can actually validate your application for the Googlebot. Like, which kind of information, so it starts the Googlebot or an instance of the Googlebot on your web page, and then you get a result out of that, like what did the Googlebot find and indexed, and how did the page look like for the Googlebot, and things like that. And you get, of course, a rating and tips. You can actually increase your website as well. And I actually haven't talked about that as well previously. You can actually even say I call it in a simple way, global Googlebot. Of course, there are a lot of Googlebots out there crawling websites and new websites, but there also must be kind of an algorithm basically to try to figure out which website should be maybe recrawled again. I mean, maybe the date and time that your website was crawled was really a bad timing. And maybe you haven't used a lot of search engine optimization and the meta tags back then in your website, but maybe 1 week later you have all the great meta tags on your website. How to tell the Googlebot, please crawl me again, that you can index now my website correctly? How do they do that? Actually, you also can do that in this Google Search Console. There is a button, as simple as that. Of course, you need to find it, but it's really well documented. It's called Google Search Console, and you can just click on the button, and over giving a website, your website, and the Googlebot, the global Googlebot, I tell now, say for a simple reason, will crawl your website again. And usually the Googlebot knows what kind of website should be crawled periodically. For example, any kind of news websites. They update most likely daily, right? Like some news website, like today this is important and the next day this is important. So Googlebots have an internal memory of what kind of websites they should crawl periodically. I mean, to be honest, of course, your own private website might not need to be crawled each and single day, but you can configure it and give the Googlebot another push to crawl your website again through this kind of Google Search Console. I do have to admit, I do not know if there's something that exists for DuckDuckGo, for the search engine bot over there, because I'm really familiar with the Googlebot and I do a lot of research about this, how this works. But I'm pretty sure this kind of logic or this kind of thing must exist in the other search engine bots as well. And of course, as I said, I do a lot of research about the Google search, about the Google search engine. Know your search engine. Just try to research a bit. I'm pretty sure you know Martin Splitt, for example. He's a Googler. He did a great series about all the crawling, rendering, re-rendering steps and how actually the Googlebot is working. I can maybe write his name down in the chat as well. I would definitely, if you want to just know a little bit more about the Googlebot, I can really highly recommend you his talks. They're amazing. Really, really, really great. So I did actually took a little bit longer than I thought, but I really hope you learned a lot today. So to sum it up for today, of course, you need to pre-render your HTML to satisfy the social media bots. So it's not only about the search engine bots, because being discoverable on social media platform, I mean, everyone is using, except of me at least, everyone is using Facebook or Instagram for getting news and updates. For me, Twitter is just really a high social platform, and I get all my news and informations on IT and tech over there. So you need to, of course, satisfy them as well. You can use Angular Universal for server-side rendering, and it just swaps out all the functionality underneath. So basically, it's using a complete different kind of rendering layer. As well, you can pre-render ahead of time. Hence, you can actually already have HTML files on your server, and maybe if another user agent that has a bot, that is a bot, crawls your website, you can give them your already pre-rendered HTML version. And even though it wasn't that much of a difference because I just created a really small app, but think big, of course, more components needs to be rendered, then of course the rendering time also will be longer, and then the performance impact is really, really high. So I'm really happy and thankful that I was able to talk here. It made actually a lot of fun, and it was really great to not having like a half an hour, 45 minutes time limit. So I did actually talk a long time, but I really hope you enjoyed it. You can find my, before we go to the Q&A, you can find my slides over here, and just ping me at any of my channels. I try to answer as fast as possible. Just ping me anytime at this through email or through my Twitter account, and I'm pretty sure I do my best to help you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Martina. It's really awesome, like also that you got to go at least in depth to really explain some of these parts. So just moving over to the Q&A real quick. I personally have two questions. So I think the first question is when installing Angular Universal, right? So you don't really have to put in like the service that you did at the first before installing the Angular Universal. Like you don't really need that particular service anymore.
You mean the Express service, or what kind of service you mean? Sorry.
The service on the project. You see the SEO service you created.
Yeah.
In the yeah. So that means when you install. Yeah.
Yeah, this service I did implement on my own. This service in the first place does not belong to Angular Universal, because it just uses the meta and the title service from Angular itself, and basically it doesn't belong really to the Angular Universal, because if you use for the Google bot, you don't need to really server-side render, and for this you can already satisfy the Google bot with just using this kind of services on your own.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Angular Universal will take care of the meta, like using the meta tags and all that for you, like automatically.
Yes, I mean, and I mean, like, not really. Like the Angular Universal just takes place that your whole JavaScript is pre-rendered and server-side rendered. That if like a Google bot or something, a social media bot, a Twitter bot, the Twitter bot is requesting your website, that it gets a fulfilled HTML site. But what needs to be rendered inside this HTML site, or what this HTML site in the end should look like, you have to define it before. Like you have to fulfill the meta tags and the title beforehand. So this is something you need to take care of. But the difference with Angular Universal is just that the meta tags are rendered in the first place. Because if you don't, if the JavaScript is not pre-rendered beforehand, the social media bot will just get an empty HTML page and nothing more, and no meta tags at all.
Oh, okay. All right, I think, and then my last question would be, so when for example, of course, you want to handle SEO, like, are there specific pages? Because, for example, you have a huge project, right? Does Angular Universal take care of SEO for, I don't know, like, where exactly would SEO be best used for in a huge Angular project?
I'm not sure if you say base useful. So the thing is, we have two separated points here. So we can do a lot of search engine optimization, like handling the meta tags and updating the meta tags that the social media bots and search engine bots are crawling your page properly. But Angular Universal really just only takes care of rendering the HTML on the server side. And if you already followed specific kind of search engine optimizations, then Angular Universal just takes care that these kind of principles are rendered inside the HTML, basically. So if you have a big, huge project, I would just highly recommend to have a global search engine optimization service, whatever you want to call it, basically, and to just for each and every single component that is a subchild to update these kind of tags. Angular Universal just takes care that the search engine bot sees these kind of meta tags you update then when it crawls these kind of child pages.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else has a question could ask?
Pretty sure it was a lot of information. But as I said, if you feel overwhelmed or don't know what to ask now, you can also always ping me on Twitter.
I think I'd like to take it over to, if there's no question, I'd like to take it over to Sandra to close up the session.
Hello. We'd like to thank you for the session, for taking us through the SEOs in Angular. It was a very wonderful session. We've learned a lot, and we hope we will have you back again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for your time and inviting me.
Thank you. So with that,